Show of hands if you can hear me. Awesome, great. I see basically none of your faces, so I'm just going to imagine you out there. So my name is Anna Baotic. I'm going to be speaking about imposter syndrome today to you. I come from a country called Croatia. We're at the south, so if you like lovely beaches and warm summers, that's where you should go for your next vacation. And I work at a company called Asseco. We do mobile banking, core banking systems, all that boring security stuff. So if that's something you like or want to hear more about, I have 4 lovely colleagues with me here today, and they will be more than happy to answer any and all of your questions regarding how we do stuff back home. Now, our agenda for today is basically imposter syndrome, what it is and what it isn't, because there are some misconceptions about what it is. How we define it and how it differs among us, because not all people suffer from the same type of imposter syndrome. Where it begins, because everything that starts needs an origin, and there is one for imposter syndrome, at least what scientists tend to say. We're going to do a quick test, or you're going to do a quick test, just yes, no questions, no other info, if you want, of course. And finally, we're going to not solve it, because it's not something that's easily solvable, but we're going to walk away with some tools and steps with which you can make your life a bit simpler and easier. So let's start with the definition. Basically, imposter syndrome is it's a pattern in which you kind of feel like you're a fraud, like you don't know what you're doing, like other people think you know what you're doing, but they might find out that you actually don't. And it's actually a very internalized problem, meaning people from the outside might not know that you have it, or even believe you when you say that you have it. And it's something that's very difficult to live with. There are different kind of gradations of how imposter syndrome affects our lives, from, oh, I'm not comfortable with this activity, I just might fail, and something like that, to people that actually have problems getting up in the morning and going to work because their workplace is so anxious and so frustrating that they simply cannot function normally. So obviously, you might be able to live with this, or you might even need some kind of help, which is nothing to be ashamed about. So let's just discuss how common this is. Now, since this is an internalized problem, meaning you feel it on the inside, it doesn't really show, you might think that you're the only one with it. Basically, it turns out that 7 out of 10 people, now I don't know how many of you are here, but let's say half of the room at least, once in their life experience some type of imposter syndrome. And since it's internalized, you all think it, but you don't show it. So those who have it, they don't really have anything to correlate with others. And it remains a problem. Now, this doesn't affect only our IT bubble. It affects all races, all colors, all walks of life, all professions. So it's everywhere. And it's present, and it's a problem. This is a quote from Maya Angelou. You most likely heard of her. She's a renowned artist, and she has produced many works. This is her take on her own perception of success. Basically, she feels like a fraud. And we all know that this makes no sense, but even people of, more vocal people and people out there who are famous do experience this. And for me personally, since I too suffer from imposter syndrome, a wake-up call came to me when I had a success. We had actually, a couple of my colleagues and I had a task which we had to complete. We were in a competition, we won, let's say we were third, and I wanted to share my success. I was really actually proud about it and wanted to share with others. So I thought, okay, I could tweet about it, I could put it on Facebook, I could share with my colleagues, but all of that felt like showing off, because if I draw attention to myself and my success, will other people be irritated? Will they think I'm just, full of it? And I turned to the only place designed for people with imposter syndrome, and that's a Slack channel where other people with the same problems come and share their problems with others. And I wrote up a big post, just sharing what we did, how we did it, what was the end result. And before I pressed, publish, I thought, oh shit, Is somebody going to, call me out on this? Am I showing off in front of people who have problems? Will they think I don't have this issue if I'm sharing? And I deleted it. And I was just like, this is some type of inception, meta, imposter syndrome problem, and it was really just like a red flag for me. And I decided, like all people who cannot do, they teach, so I decided to speak about it, since that's the only option, obviously. And we need to recognize this. If we are having problems with our own successes and sharing, and basically we see that our colleagues are struggling with things that they do, we need to basically vocalize this in one way or the other. Now, how do we define it? How do we define what type of imposter syndrome we have? Well, the most common one is called the imposter cycle, which is basically nothing more than a recursion of hell that people with imposter syndrome kind of get stuck in. They get a task, and it's achievement-related task. Basically, you need to complete something. And a regular average person will get a task, they will work, and they will come to completion. Simple. But for people with imposter syndrome, it has a few extra steps in there. First, they will step back, and they will overthink things. And when they overthink, they're going to feel doubt, anxiety, fear, panic. What if I cannot do this? What if I'm not capable enough? What if I fail, if I don't manage? So they first, put themselves down a little. Now, this is a status we don't like. We don't like bad feelings, so none of us wants to be unhappy. So the only way for them to get out of this situation is to either over-preparate, which means they will explore and learn to the extent that they're doing nothing else, or they will procrastinate. I think that most of us know what procrastination means, but I will explain a little bit more later. So they will try to go in either of those directions, and in the end, when they are done, and the task will eventually end, they will attribute their completion to either effort, because they overworked, or they will say that they got lucky, because if you put something off up until the end and then you succeeded doing it, then it must be luck, right? And the next time when you get a task, because you remember how bad it felt and how uncomfortable it was, all those feelings that you feel are going to be even more intense. And that's it. That's basically it. That's the only way to complete something. Now, over-preparation for those with imposter syndrome is kind of funny. It's funny because you should probably laugh about it. If you kind of explore a topic and you go to Wikipedia and research something, and a person with imposter syndrome that does over-preparation will click on the first link that they see in the text, because it's something that needs to be clarified. And then on that page, they will click on the first link on that page. It will just fall through like, leaves on a tree until you get to the end, or up until the point where it makes no more sense and you've lost the topic that you started with to begin with. So that's over-preparation. You think you need to know everything. You will read it twice, 3 times, 4 times. It basically consumes every moment of your time. And it's not healthy and it's not manageable. Now, procrastination, my favorite. So tell me if this sounds familiar. You have an exam, you have a work-related task, you will do your chores, you will fix the plumbing in your house, you will go shopping, your cupboards will be clean and without dust, your clothes will be color coordinated by season and size and whatever. Basically, every kind of task that you have at home, it will be more important, more fun, and more meaningful to do than actually completing what you set out to do. And then, of course, you have YouTube with all those lovely cat, dog, critter, and babies with lemons videos, which you will watch wholeheartedly because it brings you joy. And at the end, you're stuck with a lot of work done, but not the work that you actually needed to do. So I'm not going to advocate this because it's not productive, but if you want something cute to look at, Chucky is tweeting about gardening and kittens, so that's a lovely way to spend the time that you should be spending on work. Now, that's one way of defining imposter syndrome. The second one is being special or best. Now, people who have imposter syndrome sometimes compare themselves to others, their peers, their colleagues, and it can be productive, but it's mostly unhealthy because they harbor the need to be the very best. Now, you can be a unicorn in elementary school if you're the fastest, or you can jump farther, or you do algebra really, really well. But when you transition to high school and college, it turns out that there are other unicorns out there, and person with imposter syndrome will conclude, okay, so if there are many of us, I'm not special anymore. And the only conclusion a person with imposter syndrome can come to is that they're stupid. So they're not kind of okay, they're not good, not terrible, not bad, not any kind of, middle, they're just plain stupid. If they're not the best, they don't value themselves at all. So there's no middle ground here, just 0 or 1. And obviously, it's not productive. And if you're stuck in this kind of mentality, you can't really do work, you can't progress, and you're just losing a lot of time. Being a super person. Now, this is similar to what we were just discussing, but in this case, you're not comparing yourself to others. You're setting an excruciatingly impossible goal for yourself. So you need to be the absolute best. Nobody can be better, but the standards that you set up in your head is like, I'm not going to have any bugs in this new feature. Chances that that feature is properly defined and your client doesn't have change requests and that they won't open bugs that are blockers for labels and stuff, it's impossible. So if you set this kind of perfection for yourself, I can guarantee you're not going to match it anyway. No way. So those impossible goals are something that will influence our self-evaluation. Now, perfectionists are also in this particular group. So if you need to have your desk organized in a certain way, books, labels, everything, keyboard properly defined, if you cannot start working on something, if everything around you is not super clean and tidy, then this is kind of your bracket here. Of course, there is no such thing as perfect. And I think that if we acknowledge this in our lives, it would be much, much simpler. But obviously, the disappointment from expecting something perfect is profound for people who have imposter syndrome. And fear of failure is one. Now, for those who have ever failed at something in their lives, like missing a deadline or failing on a test, I don't know, nobody probably failed a test, right? This is something that we dislike. So we don't like failure. We don't feel happy when we miss something or fail or not succeed or whatever you're going to call it. But the fear of failure and the anxiety from failure for people with imposter syndrome is so profound that they're basically frozen. They cannot proceed. They cannot continue doing. They fail at something in their head, and they cannot, make that next step at finding a different route to get to the solution. So it's something that's really paralyzing. But failure is always an option, and to reduce the risk, as I already mentioned, they will either over-prepare or procrastinate up until the last moment. So again, we have this vicious cycle which we cannot get out of. Also, burnout sound familiar to anybody? This is how you get it. Fear of failure will produce so much work on your behalf that you will eventually just be tired and have no more joy in what you're doing, and that's a shame. Now, this next one is actually kind of funny. It's about people not being able to get praise and basically accept praise for what they're doing. For instance, if you get a compliment, you will think either that the person is lying or that they're faking it or any kind of reason insert here. Basically, you will not think that they're genuine. And in addition to that, you will not only not believe them, you will also try to advocate why they're wrong. So you're basically fighting them and finding arguments to tell them that they're wrong and you do not deserve that praise or you don't have enough experience or whatever you want to fill in here. And again, it's a shame because people tend to misunderstand that and think that it's false modesty. People with imposter syndrome don't know the conception of false modesty. It's just painful interaction for them. And finally, success-related guilt. believe it or not, people with imposter syndrome, when they succeed at something, they feel bad. So it makes no sense, but it stems from two reasons. One is that they're being alienated from their peers, for instance, if they're better at something or they won an award or something else. And the other is that they think that they're being excluded or that they're not a part of their community anymore. So it's basically, it's good, but the end result is bad. So they tend either not to share or not believe what people are telling them. And it usually correlates when when somebody tells you that you're the smart one or the talented one, the responsible one, any kind of labeling that happened throughout your life, this will probably attribute to this kind of feeling. Now, where does this come from? Well, it's always easiest to say that we got broken as children, but in this case, it's kind of true. So basically, when children are small, interactions in their family and in their environment is crucial to how they perceive themselves. And for imposter syndrome to sink their claws into children and to us eventually when we're grown-ups, it basically comes from a weird sense of self-worth. For instance, you get the image that you get in your family about you might not relate to your actual image, and when those two clash, you're kind of broken because children they cannot compensate with logic. They're children. So it basically depends whether you got no praise as a child. So whatever you did, it was either never good enough or nobody noticed and nobody said, okay, good work. This was really, a big effort on your part. You got all the praise, meaning that, oh, you took a step, you tied your shoe, good job. So everything basically was the same. No distinguishment from real achievements to those everyday ones. You don't deserve. Now, this is something the parents tend to use with more than one children. So your brother ate the broccoli, so he can have dessert. You don't deserve dessert. Now, children might listen to the first sentence, but the only thing they actually hear, you don't deserve dessert. And they kind of grow up thinking that they don't deserve stuff because, again, you cannot reason to that kind of extent with children. And finally, labels, like I mentioned, the talented one, the sensitive one, basically any kind of exclusion from the group that might not be true will kind of leave a mark on you as you grow up. And this is all fine, the origins can be here from my personal perspective, but the only true place where imposter syndrome comes to shine is our environment. And by our environment, I mean mostly our workplace. So your jobs, your companies, your teams, this is where it will basically be most prominent. And to put it more fluently, basically faced with a hostile and discriminatory environment, one we are unwelcome in. Perception of our skills, our chances, and our abilities to succeed change and suffer. So if a new team member joins your team and you're hostile to him or her, or you're being dismissive, or you don't allow questions to be asked, or you try to be passive-aggressive, sarcastic, it can be funny, but not with new people in the company who don't know how you communicate. This will be a good ground for people to get imposter syndrome. And at this point, it's not imposter syndrome. They are working in a hostile environment. So it's just plain wrong. But this is how they will feel, and they will basically correlate one with the other. This is what we produce, the hostile environment, and we need to be mindful about that. And if you have seen a hostile environment or a toxic one, or know people who work with one, my suggestion is to fight it with all you've got. So talk to your peers, talk to your colleagues, talk to the CEO. Basically, everything comes top to down, so you need to work with your management and tell them that there is a problem in your environment or your company and that the culture is a misfire, how you want to call it. And after all that you do, either for yourself or others, if there is no movement, my suggestion is to leave that company because it's better for you. Now, the fun part, because we all love tests and questionnaires. Do you have imposter syndrome? Now, you don't need to fill this out. I placed a link on Twitter as well. But if you want to, there are 10 short questions there. Yes, no, no names, no email addresses, nothing. And you can basically check whether or not you have ever had imposter syndrome. The score of 4 or more means that you have. And just one word of advice, if you get the results and think, okay, this makes no sense, I must not have imposter syndrome, then you probably definitely have it. So I'm going to go through the questions really shortly for those who are not interested in filling it out. Basically, it's just, were you ever worried that you're not as capable as you are? Do you feel pressure to answer any professional question? So you must know everything there is out there. Is it hard for you to accept compliments or any kind of praise? Do you compare yourself to others? Do you think that you were just in the right place at the right time and knew the right people? Because otherwise you probably would not have this job and the salary that you have. Do you think that if you can do it, probably everybody else can? Do you agonize over the smallest flaws in your work? So a typo, a mistake, you sent an email with a wrong letter somewhere and you're just going to die from shame. Do you become defensive when you get constructive criticism? Now, this is really interesting here because this is not due to lack of humility. It's due to the fact that getting feedback that you did something wrong or you could do it better makes you feel inept. So that's really a shame. And when you do have success, do you think you fooled somebody? Like you didn't really know 100% of that test, you just kind of wiggled your way through it. And of course, you have no clue what you're doing and you're just kind of making it up along the way. Now, if you answer, I will share the results after the presentation via Twitter, but we're going to solve all our issues right now. And the solution is that there is no solution, there is no algorithm, there is no manual. Basically, there's nothing that will remove our imposter syndrome from our lives because it's us. We are our enemy. We're the ones who will hold a grudge and remember every mistake that we made, everything we said wrong, basically any kind of problem that we caused and we shouldn't have, where we were embarrassed by something. We will kind of dish it out at the worst moments when you need to prepare for something and be focused. Oh, remember when you said that wrong thing in that one meetup and everybody was just looking weird? Basically, we will kind of attack ourselves in this situation. And there's nothing to fix here because in the end, we're not broken. There is no manual. There is no one size fits all. There's no same method that we can use to make it better for ourselves. But there are several steps which we can take in order to kind of push it aside and ignore it. First of all, we should name it. Now, this is interesting because we can't really fight something that's elusive, that doesn't exist, that doesn't have form, that doesn't have a name. For all those Harry Potter fans, if there are any here, there is a part of the movie where they open this weird mirror and any kind of horror that you hate comes out of it, like a clown or bugs or, I don't know, pink cars, whatever it is that you really, really dislike, it will jump at you. And basically, you cannot react to something if you cannot envision it, if it doesn't have a name. So name your imposter, give it some kind of label or anything else. Because if there was somebody at work or in the street yelling at you and telling you ugly things, you would probably either remove yourself from the situation or tell them to shut up. And I think that there's no difference here. You need to be able to react to something that's kind of putting you down. So this is the first step, definitely. Setting smart goals. Now, for those of you who have those boring yearly reviews with your managers, and they're really boring, you will probably have some kind of, questionnaire or a list of things that you need to achieve in the next 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, doesn't matter how often. And you will be required to set goals for yourself, or your manager will set them. Now, these goals are a good idea because they give you some kind of, reference system of what you need to do better, what you need to do quicker, what you need to do more focused. But those goals need to be SMART, and that's a good acronym because it's very simple. The tasks need to be specific. So a task that says, produce more code. That's not, really specific. What does that mean? Is that better code? Is that worse code? What are we getting with that? It needs to be very, very specific. For instance, implement this library in the next 2 weeks. We're going to get to time. But it needs to be very, very specific, because otherwise you won't know what to do, and you can kind of scratch that goal from the list immediately. The next one is measurable. Now, you need to be able to measure your goal. Now, you probably could say, okay, all reasonable blockers need to be solved within 24 hours of report. But having, unmeasurable goals like, I need to have fewer bugs, what does that mean? How much? 20%, 30%? Again, is this feature documented? Do we have a crazy client? So many questions out there. So you need to keep it simple, and you need to keep it measurable. Is it achievable? Now, this is the part where our perfectionists come into play, and they try to envision something that's really not feasible in any kind of world. Again, work with your managers and try to define something that can actually be done in a given time. And by given time, it does mean actually time that can be measured. Relevant. Now, you work at your workplace on specific tasks. Now, tasks that are not relevant to what you're doing, they could probably be just a waste of time. Now, they need to be relevant to either your field or your future work or the features that you're working with. Otherwise, again, it makes no sense. And again, time bound. What does have fewer bugs in general, again, mean? Unless you have a specific time, okay, this new library will be implemented in 2 weeks. I'm going to rewrite this code in the next 2 months. But having something, out there, abstract, makes no sense in this situation, because you're basically setting yourself up for failure, and then the cycle continues again. Finding balance. Now, we know that we spend a lot of time working, and sometimes it happens that when we allocate 100% of ourselves to our work, that we're doing well for the company and for ourselves, and it will be fine. But the point is, we need more in our lives. We need to have a hobby. We need to be able to see our family. We need time for ourselves offline and online. And consuming only work, it leads to burnout. And it's not healthy, and it's not sustainable for any of us. So you need to find balance. That means shutting down your laptop at some point in time, or putting your phone on airplane mode if it's necessary, or maybe just discussing with your managers that the kind of work dynamic that's in your workplace isn't it's just not feasible or maintainable. Progress over success. Now, success is not something that's final. You will not learn a new language or a new feature or a new, any kind of skill and say, okay, I'm done. I can retire now and I don't need to work anymore. You will keep learning. Especially in our industry, we're basically learning something new every day. If not every day, then every week, or if you're into JavaScript, probably every few minutes, because something changes always there very, very quickly. And we shouldn't be slaves to this. We should value our progress over success every time, because, again, we're never done with learning and growing. And this is something that we should put value on, not some kind of milestone. Milestones are okay, but you need to acknowledge the work that you put in to get there. Failure is just an attempt. So again, we don't like failure. It feels bad. It's difficult for people to continue sometimes when they fail at something. It's frustrating. But if we consider failure just some kind of attempt that hasn't produced results yet, then it can be better. We need our failures, because people that are here today, you're the sum of your successes and failures and attempts and everything else. And failures teach you something. They teach you if something's too far to jump over. They will teach you if something's too hot to touch. And basically, as everything else in life, this is something that builds your character. And it also teaches you places that need to be improved. But most importantly, it teaches us humility, which I feel that in the recent years, with all the ninjas and rock stars and other toxic generating entities in our workplace, is something that's gravely lacking. Mentor others. Now, you might think, how am I supposed to mentor others when obviously I have problems myself? And this is really, really good advice because it serves two purposes. First of all, it takes the focus of ourselves, so you can wallow in self-pity and think, okay, I cannot do this, I'm bad at this. But you can also kind of teach others that it's normal to have doubts, and it's normal to have problems, and it's normal to fail at stuff temporarily before you succeed in it after trying a different route. But we're not here to fix others. We're here to help them move on. So mentoring is a huge part because you will learn and you will help others learn. And you will probably learn from them as well because different perspective is usually very, very helpful, especially in our industry. Speak up. Now, I will, again, share with the results of the quiz later on, but if statistics don't lie, 70% of this room has experienced imposter syndrome. And unless you've told somebody about this today, every other person who has experienced it will think, okay, nobody in this room has a problem with this. And that's a misconception, and it should be changed. It sells a really, really false image of the current status of this problem. We all need to share. So you don't need to, I don't know, announce it to the world, but if you have a team and they are struggling with solving issues, maybe it's just this. Maybe it's imposter syndrome, and maybe they just need a voice to express their concerns. And after that, the whole team can progress. But if we show others that their perceptions of us are equally incorrect as ours of them, then we can progress together. Keep a track record. Now, this is really, really useful for several things. You can either have like a folder with snapshots or screenshots or basically files or emails when somebody gave you praise for something that you really did well, or that people were really content with working with you, or that you helped somebody, or that your team succeeded in something because you helped them. But it kind of serves as a, like a treasure box for yourself when you feel down and you need a little bit kind of pick me up to go and continue. And it can be a list of achieved tasks. Now, again, if you have those yearly or bi-yearly reviews with your boss, it's kind of difficult to argue facts when you're asking for a raise, and this is very useful, especially at that time. And finally, it's not just about you. If you look around you, people you know or you may not know, they have similar issues but different experiences, and we all have kind of a small part of the picture, not the whole one. We're here to learn. We won't learn every bit of technology today here. We will kind of get motivated to push others and ourselves to try. And basically, each one of us participates, but together we progress. And finally, you should do it anyway. So if you're eyeing that blog post that you want to write, or you want to answer that Stack Overflow question, but you are fearful of all the person-splaining that's going to happen by somebody else, you should do it anyway because it's experience, positive or negative, it doesn't matter. And you should kind of focus on yourself and your own progress, and this is a great way to do it. If you're not doing it for others to help them, you should do it for yourself. And thank you. Okay, so if there are any questions, I can take them now. We can take them after the session. Okay, so there is one here in the second row.
Yeah, so you said like obviously having a toxic environment is bad. Sorry, having a toxic environment is bad for imposters, but is there any way you can like foster environment which helps people with imposter syndrome? So or does it like mostly rely on those with imposter syndrome to?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So basically, I think that the company culture always kind of stems down from top to bottom. So the way your management kind of relates to their workers, and it kind of trickles down. So middle management will look up to the management, and workers will look to the middle management. I think that those with imposter syndrome generally tend to not speak for themselves. I'm not generalizing, but that's the most common reaction. So it should be from an ally or somebody who is aware of this or has had experience with this for them to become vocal. if you, again, can talk to your management and say, okay, we have a problem here, there is kind of negative atmosphere, they should be recipient to that kind of info, which doesn't necessarily mean that it will. And showing a positive example in terms of talking to your peers and talking to your colleagues and basically setting an example for your workplace. Other than that, I wouldn't place the emotional labor of fixing this issue exclusively on those who have it, but be aware of it and maybe try to ascertain whether or not your company or your team has this kind of issue.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
No more questions?
No more
Okay,
questions.
cool. Another round of applause for Anna, please.